Hey, back with another chapter of The West Beyond the West. This chapter is the Yng Prvnc, 1871 to 1900, basically the first 30 years of BC. Should probably start off by saying at the beginning of this that we are actually going to circle back. There's a couple of topics that do not come up in these chapters, which this is 1871 to 1900, the Yng Prvnc, but we're also going to get population explosion, 1886 to 1914, and then probably most notably Chapter 8, disregard of native peoples, 1858 to 1945, because that is a huge part of the history, which in a regular history might get just a little kind of paragraph here or there. Kudos to Barman at this point actually saying, hey, let's stop and do an actually chapter on how native peoples were completely disregarded in the massive building up and creation of British Columbia as a white settler province. So yeah, the Yng Prvnc, 1871 to 1900. At the beginning of this, 1871 is when BC becomes a province, and Vancouver Island, and Victoria especially is the dominant player at this point. That is where the kind of pure to steal from across the continent, the Pure Lane Brits are. These are the direct from the old country and they've held power under James kind of James Douglas, and basically kind of favoring them, trying to make sure that there isn't actually population representation. Everything is done by appointment, and those appointments are coming from the Brits who have come over. That, however, shifts in after BC becomes a province. We start actually getting more kind of representational government. Though it's interesting, even at this point, there's definitely the thing of because there's a recognition that it's kind of harder to represent rural areas. It takes a lot less votes to elect like an MLA, a municipal legislative assembly member, in the rural areas than it does in the like Victoria or Vancouver or New West or places like that, where there's a population density. Might also help with control of stuff as well, if you've got wealthy people in rural areas that can actually team up with Victoria. That said, we still get the slide. We get the slide by the end of the century. Vancouver will surpass Victoria for population. There is a fight over the CPR terminus. The Vancouver Island people want to put it well north, and surprisingly, and join up going through islands to the island and then down to Victoria, and using Esquimalt as the main harbor, completely bypassing, surprise, Vancouver. However, the CPR is like, that does not make any financial sense at all. We want to get down there. We can also take advantage of the Americans down below. There's not big enough of a port because we've got aspirations of being a major port going out into Asia and stuff like that. So even though at that point the Vancouver Island, Victoria Brits threaten succession, the CPR terminus is put in Vancouver, and really, as Barman kind of concludes in this chapter, this is a province town. It used to be the company town, used to be the HBC, the Hudson's Bay Company, with the fur trade and all that. Now it is the railway. It is the Canadian Pacific Railway, which they've joined it up with the rest of Canada, and that is indeed where it is coming through. We get notations of like, hey, this is where more and more Chinese labor is being brought in to work on both, on the railway, and then on canning, coal mining, basically areas where they're importing cheap labor, which is maltreated and underpaid, and often kind of basically little more than serfs, indentured serfs. It's basically you get entrepreneurs, Chinese bosses who bring over Chinese people to Canada, and by that mostly males, not females. This is still a very male-dominated province, even in the white colonial sense as well, through a large point of this period. And you then work off the money that they they spent to bring you over here at very incredibly low wages. So it's basically indentured servitude. Kind of a familiar theme. We have kind of the boom bust economy. This is, we're depending on resources. When the resources are up, the money is flowing in, but when the resources go down, things go down. Vancouver itself isn't created until isn't actually a place until the terminus is decided. It's like they decide on the where the CPR is going to kind of end from all the way across Canada. It's going to end in Vancouver, and this is when they incorporate Vancouver as a place. Before that, there was Granville and a couple of other places, but it was a cheap area. The speculators hadn't got to it as much, and the people who were there were like, "Oh, we really want you to come in," and they actually donated like a third of their land to the CPR because they knew that once the CPR came in, their other holdings would skyrocket in things. So the CPR comes in, Vancouver gets founded, and very rapidly it gets built up. It's one of these things where you get the roads, you get the sidewalks, you get all the kind of amenities of a city put through here. This is where we're getting it goes from just a couple of 150 people to just explosion in growth, explosion in businesses. The CPR itself, under the auspices of the CPR, they create they make the Hotel Vancouver, an opera house. It's this sort of this idea they're going to have just a line of you take the railway through, you get to luxury in the Hotel Vancouver, the opera house. You take the cruise ships that are going to take you on to the Orient or San Francisco and stuff like that. It was like the whole experience. And indeed, a lot of the land, the choice land, gets given to or sold to the CPR employees, officials, directors, and stuff like that. That is the dominant people of this place. Whereas it was the HBC in Victoria, it's the CPR in Vancouver. Get a lot of entrepreneurs setting up. There's an American, Benjamin T. Rogers, sets up a sugar manufacturing thing, Rogers Sugar, which I think I probably take a look in my pantry. I have bag of Rogers Sugar, which is BC sugar, which initially apparently all that sugar came from the Philippines and then was packaged up and sold as far across Canada as Manitoba and stuff like that. Victoria at this point, this period is fading. We're getting they get deindustrialization when we hook up with the East. Basically, the East is, because of its larger population, larger base, is able to manufacture stuff much cheaper than little operations in Victoria. So they end up going under. The maritime is overfishing there. Basically, the maritime stuff sort of fades from them as well. So they lose a lot of industry. They kind of it stagnates a lot. And yeah, as I said, by the end of the 19th century, Vancouver surpasses Victoria as having the largest of population base. The CPR, because it's coming through BC, has the big influence on exactly where the new towns and everything set up, and also sternwheelers. They apply, basically sternwheeler, wheels of on the back of big kind of like ferry boats, where they don't actually need a dock because all the powers at the back. It can just nose up to the shore, and people can get on and off, and then it reverses back off again. There's 40 sternwheelers operating in British Columbia by the end of this time. Most notably for myself, because I'm an Okanagan boy, there's the ones on Okanagan Lake, which opened this place up. It was just kind of more ranching and stuff like that. It becomes much more what it is sort of even today, of kind of growing fruits and grains in this area. It's like, where I grew up in Kelowna, there were orchards and vineyards, kind of on either side of me as I was growing up. So that was sort of a connected part of my stuff. Very much so. This is a province where it's all about the natural resources and exploiting them, and doing some, it's a lot of it is exporting raw natural resources. Like, I mean, you refine everything you can at the mining thing. The fish, as close to the site as possible. But all this stuff is getting shipped off across the country. And the CPR had a thing of like, well, basically this is benefiting the West. So stuff coming in is shipped at a lower rate than stuff is going out, which also puts any manufacturing and stuff like that at a disadvantage. They basically kept it as a resources only kind of a province. And this is a part of kind of John A. Macdonald's kind of national policy as well. The idea of that, we're going to, that basically the periphery, aka BC in this case, is going to feed the natural resources into central Canada, which is then going to do the manufacturing and all that stuff, and then the wealth will theoretically then trickle down back to the provinces and stuff like that. Salmon canning was one of these interesting things of like the idea of canning was only the technology only kind of developed in like the 1820s, but by 1870 they picked this up in BC and were canning especially like sockeye salmon and stuff like that, and was a huge market that they were shipping to the UK. There's a funny thing in here of Emily Carr. She arrives in Britain to study art. Our great artist Emily Carr, and all that some Presbyterian minister wants to know is like, oh, how much sockeye do you guys produce per annum that comes to Britain? There's also kind of some interesting contrasts in how we treat our laborers in this province. Barman gives the example of a Nanaimo company where it actually set up Nanaimo as a place for its coal miner workers. Had like what seemed like actually pretty good. It's like they believe like the happier that we can make the miners, the more productive they will be. If there were mining accidents, they would compensate and ensure that like widows and that had fuel. It was a fairly beneficent kind of a good company that way. In contrast to we get Robert Dunsmuir, who apparently kind of rose up in the ranks of his own of the kind of the coal mining stuff because he was so good with siding with the managers and the owners, set up his own thing and ruthlessly exploited people as hard as he could. Miners were in the kind of the most bare bones kind of living situations without even running water. Men and women, they basically had to buy stuff from a company store at the highest rates possible. Definitely one of the big ones in favor of like, oh, let's bring in Chinese or bring in European non-English speaking immigrants to work at our mines because they couldn't actually kind of band together and talk to other workers and kind of protest. When there was a protest, there was because he cut wages by a third at a certain point. He basically got the government to call in the troops, and even when the government and the miners said like, oh well, let's kind of come to some kind of agreement, let's do arbitration, he said no, and he shut down the entire operations for like a year or something like that, and until basically the government had to kind of push it back in because he was such a gigantic part of the economy that it was killing all of the BC economy, so they had to side with him. And the workers ended up with another additional 5% cut in the thing. And indeed, his son, James, also continued the family tradition and became premier. While his mines were running at a death rate of about 3 to 4 times the rate of death rates in coal mines from the rest of the British Empire. So Dunsmuirs, real assholes. There's definitely other families across Canada that are known for basically crushing the working people, and this was definitely one of them. One of the wealthiest, unfortunately, also one of the wealthiest men in the province at the same time. So he basically owned everything. There's definitely a thing in here of of, with the CPR, with the government. The government was basically there to hand out patronage, to hand out land grants, to hand out land rights to things, and that you had to be connected to get stuff like that. And indeed, to get a job, it was a patronage job. It was all about patronage, all about kind of greasing the wheels. This is that kind of time of kind of the of this century where it's like basically it's all business. Everything is all business. We're all open for business. We're exploiting stuff. It's pretty, it's a company town where if you're not in with a company, you are screwed. And here, let me just read the final paragraph of this chapter. During British Columbia's first 3 decades in Confederation, the Canadian Pacific Railway provided the principal motif. In the interlude during which British Columbians awaited their promised line, little changed. Once the railway was in place, the West Coast province acquired a new ethos and a new vitality. Yet, dependency on staples continued unabated. In many ways, British Columbia only remained a company province, the CPR replacing the HBC. So yeah, that is the, and we get lots of pictures, which I won't bother to hold up. That was chapter 6, the Yng Prvnc, British Columbia. Next time we will do chapter 7, population explosion, 1886 to 1914. And a note in the opening paragraph, which I had read. In less than 3 decades, the province's non-native population expanded almost tenfold, even as the Indian people declined by 1/3. So that kind of gives you an idea of great for settlers, not great for the native peoples of British Columbia. All right, more videos later.